Class of 2025 recruiting target Caleb Wilson is headed to Tuscaloosa this weekend for his official. I'm sorry, hang on. What's that now? Really? Class of 2025 target Caleb Wilson has canceled his Alabama visit this weekend, and instead he's coming to Chapel Hill. Ooh, I like this.
You are Locked On Tar Heels, your daily podcast on the UNC Tar Heels. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Hey there, what's up? It's Thursday, October 3rd, 2024. Welcome into the Locked On Tar Heels podcast, the only daily North Carolina show out there. I'm your host, Isaac Shade, and you're joining me at the place to get your Carolina content every single day. It's all part of the Locked On Podcast Network. Thanks for making us your first listen or watch, and I want to give a special shout out to our everydayers, all the members of the Locked On Tar Heels Discord, and of course, our Locked On Tar Heels insiders. Welcome everyone, let's get after it. Today's episode is brought to you by FanDuel. Place your first $5 bet, and you'll get started with $200 in bonus bets guaranteed. Visit FanDuel.com to get started. Coming up on the show today, we kidded about it in the cold open there, but Caleb Wilson is coming back to Carolina for another visit. That's great news, and I want to talk about what that can mean for the class of 2025. Also announced on Wednesday, a little bit earlier, is the fact that a Thanksgiving Day showcase for next season against Michigan State. So we'll get into all of that on today's show. I thought that was actually going to lead the way until this Caleb Wilson news dropped. So that's where we're headed right now. For those of you who don't know, Caleb Wilson is a top 5 recruit in the class of 2025, a forward and somebody that has grown and expanded his game to include some strong defense and things of that nature. So here's the deal. Here's the situation. On Wednesday night, actually, I should go back further than that. Caleb Wilson was scheduled to visit Alabama this weekend, his official visit. And I'll tell you what, we have taken so many L's, whether in recruiting or on the court to Alabama, that I'm going to hang on to any little victory we can get over them right now. On Tuesday, Caleb Wilson announced that he was canceling his, or I guess really it came out that he was canceling his visit to Alabama this weekend. That first was reported by Trilly Donovan, this guy who's got all these insiders all over the place, these sources, and just has all the information always. And look, by the way, this is not a visit that was canceled for this weekend, postponed, and is going to be rescheduled. Caleb Wilson is not going to Alabama unless something changes. That said, Caleb Wilson took to Twitter on Wednesday night at 8:26 p.m. with a picture from his initial visit to North Carolina and simply said, "I will be in Chapel Hill this Saturday, #TarHeel." So if you don't remember, Caleb Wilson initially has already taken an official visit to North Carolina. He did that back on February 3rd for the home win over Duke. And so 93-84 victory there. And now he's coming back again for an unofficial visit. And that's really encouraging, especially because, as a reminder, unofficial visits are on your own dime. So he's coming back of his own volition. And it's not like he's a native and he can just roll up or, lives in North Carolina. No, he's down in Atlanta. And so he's coming back up to Chapel Hill. So this, friends, is encouraging. Now, in terms of other official visits for Wilson, he has been to Kentucky recently. And for a while, I've kind of thought they were the front runner. He's also been to UCF. And all that remains that's scheduled on his calendar is going to Georgia Tech the weekend of October 18th. The expectation, at least from his own mouth, is that he will schedule a few more visits before making a decision. Other visits he's mentioned are Arkansas, BYU, Ohio State, Oregon, Tennessee, USC. How many of those will he actually take? I don't know. We'll see. We'll find out. But to all of this, I say, do not let Caleb Wilson leave this weekend without getting some sort of assurance. This dude has come previously. Since then, he's been to Kentucky, where, everything sounds like it went just peaches and rainbows. And, other high recruits are already in for them with Malachi Moreno, Jasper Johnson. I wouldn't be shocked if his buddy Caden Lewis winds up there. And so we'll see what happens with that. But for me, if Carolina was going to be in the mix with Caleb Wilson, they had to get him back to campus for another visit. And there was, kind of some thought that he eventually would. But the fact that he not only cancels this Alabama visit, but in its place schedules this Carolina visit, man, that is great news for the Tar Heels. So my thought is, if you are Hubert Davis and company, you got to feel great about this. And you wonder, like, is this something we could lock up this weekend? Is there a world in which, remember, like Walker Kessler kind of unexpectedly quickly committed to the Tar Heels? I know this wouldn't be a quick commit because he's already been, but it's like, he's coming back. What can you do? And I've wondered, like, why the return? Is it that you didn't get all your questions answered the first time? Is it, hey, this is a new team and I want to see what these guys look like? How is it with other high-end elite recruits with Ian Jackson and Drake Powell being there? Is it, maybe that he knows what he wants to do and the move is Carolina? And if so, get ready to learn Hubert Davis, buddy. Come on down. And so obviously all that speculation, but it certainly can't be a bad thing that he's coming back, right? And so you can look at this and say, man, this seems like a good situation. So make this happen if you're Hubert Davis and the staff. And look, Caleb Wilson is somebody I've been really impressed with. Hopefully you got a chance to watch, like, in the Peach Jam this summer at the Peach Jam championship game where he plays with Knight Riders with the Boozer twins. And they were going up against actually AJ Dybantsa and Tyron Stokes, who is a stud player in the 26 class. And Caleb Wilson and the Boozer twins won that championship. And I was really impressed. At Peach Jam, averaged 17.3 points, 7 rebounds, and shot 62% from the field. He has somebody that kind of transitioned over to Knight Riders. And it's kind of like think of it similar to Harrison Ingram leaving Stanford to come to Carolina, left a team where he was the dude and came to be one of the dudes with Knight Riders. And I think that allowed his game to flourish. He's leaned more into his defensive effort, knowing that that's a way that he can really set himself apart. And so, man, there's just a lot I like about Caleb Wilson and his game. In terms of, other visits for this weekend, it's interesting. Actually, Nico Bundalo is also going to be in Chapel Hill this weekend for his official visit. And I say that's interesting because he is also a 2025 forward, 6'10", 215, that Carolina is strongly looking at. So there's an interesting dynamic there of, like, it's probably one or the other of those guys if you're looking at that. And in fact, here in just a few minutes, we're going to look at and talk about the potential shape of this 2025 class. But there is that dynamic of, it looks like right now it's probably not both those guys. So that'll be an interesting thing. What about Caleb Wilson's commitment timeline? Because obviously that plays into this as well. Because while I'm saying, dude, do what you got to do to lock him up this weekend, make Caleb Wilson a Tar Heel, Wilson told 247 Sports last week, quote, depending on how my visits go, I could see myself committing in maybe December or January. It's just going to be based on how I feel. It's probably going to be January because I want to see how schools play in their conferences, end quote. Here's a couple things I take away from that quote. We're always trying to read between the lines to see if we can get to better understanding. He used in that quote a lot of words of uncertainty, depending, could see, maybe, probably, right? Depending on how my visits go, I could see myself committing in maybe December or January. It's just going to be based on how I feel. It's probably going to be, you just see all the, like, what that says to me is there is a world in which Caleb Wilson could move up this timeline if he sees what he wants to see and feels good about it and with his family and all that stuff. I'm not saying he will, but I'm just saying the door is left open for that possibility. And so let's not rule it out. Also, when he says at the end there, I want to see how schools play in their conferences. In this day and age, man, it feels like guys are waiting longer and longer and longer because they want to get a better idea of what minutes are going to be available, what's going to happen in the transfer portal, who's leaving, who's staying. And so him kind of hedging his bets with waiting till January to see how teams are playing. Who's coming back? What are each team's front courts going to look like? Who, based on their play, is going to be there? And, like all of that kind of stuff. That's all part of it. So I wouldn't be shocked at all if Caleb Wilson sees what he needs to see this weekend and commits. Is he going to? I have no idea. But man, there's some tea leaves there that at the very least suggested as a strong possibility. So we'll keep our eyes on it. Also, I love that Theo Pinson is getting in on this action. He quote tweeted Caleb Wilson's tweet and just said, "Yes, sir, my boy," with like 4 exclamation points after it. And so Theo, go do your work. Other Carolina dudes, go get after it. Joel Berry and others. So then, with all of this and the potential, like Caleb Wilson kind of repopping for Carolina, where are we with the class of 2025? What is the shape of at least the high school portion of it going to look like? What's the plan? We're going to get into all of that and more in just a second. Right after I tell you about FanDuel. Hey, NFL fans, you can start this season with a big return on FanDuel. It's America's #1 sportsbook. So when you get a hunch in the middle of the game, you can check out the latest stats, view live play-by-play, and so much more on the same page where you place your bets. You'll get started with $200 in bonus bets guaranteed when you place your first $5 bet. How about we look at the national championship odds ahead of this season? They've actually fluctuated a little bit in the last couple days. Duke now leads the way by themselves at plus 1,000, followed by UConn and Kansas at plus 1,100, Houston and Alabama at plus 1,300, and then Carolina, Gonzaga, and Iowa State at plus 2,000, and everybody else after that. So Carolina in good shape, got to knock off those Dukies, man. So if you want to get in on that action, get Carolina while they're a little bit lower, or anybody else, go check it out at FanDuel.com. It's America's #1 sportsbook. We're talking about elite 5-star player Caleb Wilson in the class of 2025. We've just talked about how he's canceled his Alabama official visit for this weekend and instead is taking a return visit to North Carolina and unofficial. One of the things I realized I actually forgot to mention in talking about his previous visits is he actually took some last fall as well. He had officials to Auburn and to Stanford and unofficials to Kentucky and Georgia Tech and Tennessee and Alabama. And so just making another round of it this fall with more officials and obviously more unofficials. But the question that I want to work at getting to now is, what is Carolina's plan for 2025 in terms of high school recruiting? What do they want the shape of this class to talk about? And it's interesting because just a couple days ago, I think it was on Tuesday's show, I talked about how AJ Dybantsa is the white whale, but he's not the only elite 5-star prospect that Carolina still has a shot with. Amongst others, I mentioned Caleb Wilson and Nate Ament, although they don't have an official scheduled with Ament yet. Players like Koa Pete, it seems like, is out of the picture for Carolina. I think he's going to go ultimately to Arizona. I do want to reframe the argument I made a couple days ago just a little bit, because I don't want to get it confused that I'm saying any of these other players are Dybantsa. Dybantsa is in a tier by himself. My point on Tuesday was simply there are other players that are elite, but again, they are not AJ Dybantsa. So just make sure you hear me making that very clear. But Caleb Wilson is certainly one of those. And now, while it was like, hey, Carolina still has a shot at Wilson, now, as I said a little bit ago, I think is stronger than ever of a case, the fact that he's coming back. So that said, what is the hope for plan for this 25 high school recruiting class? And we got to specify that now because it's separate from the transfer portal class of 25. Well, Sherrell McMillan from Inside Carolina has kind of outlined what it seems like the Tar Heels are working to do. And basically it is this: 2 guards, a forward, and a Dybantsa. Let me unpack that a little more. Carolina looking at 2 guards for their backcourt. And I think that makes a ton of sense because RJ Davis is obviously going to be gone. We're assuming that Ian Jackson is going to be gone. You don't know about Elliot Cadeau. I would say at this point that I would imagine Seth Trimble would be back. With Cadeau, I think that's kind of the linchpin. It depends on how this year goes for him ultimately. But Carolina, as you know, landed Derek Dixon last Friday, so he's in, he's set. Not really a point guard guy, although he's working on those skills, more of a shooter, and boy, can he shoot. And then the other guard spot seems like it's ultimately going to be Braylon Mullins, who is the more highly rated, like just a fringe 5-star guy, like in 15, 16 range. And then Isaiah Dennis, who's down closer to 50 in that Derek Dixon range. Mullins is down to a threesome of Carolina, Indiana, his home state team, and UConn. UConn this week just landed Darius Adams, who's another very high recruit in this class. And is the same, like a big shooting guard. And so it would seem like maybe UConn is out. Can't rule that out, but certainly not a factor in their favor. From again, kind of trying to read tea leaves, reading between the lines, you know how Sean May was Indiana native, Indiana boy. His dad played for the Hoosiers, but this man had the gall to leave the Hoosier State and come to Chapel Hill and is forever a hero. And now he's on staff. I don't get that same vibe from Braylon Mullins. It sounds like somebody who feels like maybe he might want to go somewhere else, but feels like he should stay home. And I don't know if he's got the gumption to up and leave. I'd love it if it would happen, man, because I love Braylon Mullins and his game, but we'll have to see. That said, I think right now, Dennis is the more likely option of the two to be that second guard for Carolina, unless something else just pops or something else happens. I think that's where we're at. And as a reminder, like the Caden Lewis thing is off now as well. And so that's not going to happen. So I think the most likely scenario is Dixon, obviously already in, and Dennis. But man, I would love to get Mullins. We'll see on that. You know, at this point, it sounds like it's about right at a month. Dennis is committing on November 2nd, and Mullins is right in there. And so that one I feel like is going to be an interesting race. And then in terms of a forward, Sherrell McMillan has said he expects Carolina to pursue, and when I say expects them to pursue, this is from his sources and what he's talking to with them, and the man is always right. I'm just telling you that. So there's the Caleb Wilson of all this, and man, I would love to land Caleb Wilson. But then also, as I said, Nico Bundalo is on campus this weekend. There's still the potential of Nick Hemenia, who was on campus several weeks ago. So I would imagine the forward spot would be taken by one of those three guys. Wilson, the most highly ranked of them. But, you know, as it goes, you're looking for the guy that fits your program best. Don't like, yes, rankings matter, but we just can't get all tied up in it and not think about stuff. So if Hemenia or Bundalo is the better fit, man, let's grab them. But if Wilson wants to be a Tar Heel, baby, you take Wilson. And then the fourth thing is the AJ Dybantsa tier. And again, 2 guards, a forward, and a Dybantsa, because you either get the white whale or you don't. You either get Cooper Flag or you don't. You either get, you know, whoever's number one in the, I guess Tyron Stokes is right up there by that. You either get a Tyron Stokes or you don't, for example. And so what McMillan has said is that it's either going to be 3 or 4, and that's just whether you get AJ Dybantsa or not. And then you get a couple of these guys locked in, because as a reminder, Carolina has cast this wide net and you're not going to land everybody. It's just not a thing. And then you see what you've got from the high school ranks, and then you backfill with portal guys as needed. That and I ultimately would love Carolina to be able to land there a nice mix of returners and incoming high school recruits who you can develop and grow as a homegrown part of your system, and then use the transfer portal as kind of spot treatment rather than a reliance tool. And I think that's a healthy way to look at it and think about it. So, for example, say Elliot Cadeau is gone after next year. There's nobody on the team right now, with due respect to Seth Trimble or of Derek Dixon, that is the primary ball handler that you're looking at. Not that I don't think Seth Trimble can do that in spurts. It's just not his main forte right now. Although I'd love to take a Joe Forte. That'd be great. And so I think the transfer portal could be a way in which if Elliot Cadeau's gone, you backfill next year. That's just a great example. Now, what's interesting is there was some great conversation in the Locked on Tar Heels Discord about the possibility of landing both a Dybantsa and Caleb Wilson, because that's ultimately like 2 top 5 players in this class of 2025. And one of the guys asked me the question, who was it? I want to be able to give proper credit here to where credit's due. It was a YouTuber junior who had asked it and just said, Isaac, so do you think the AJ Dybantsa / Wilson duo could become a thing or not. Because a big part of the conversation we were having in the Discord was surrounding the finances of it all, which unfortunately is a thing in this day and age that you truly have to consider. And I don't mean unfortunately in terms of I don't want the players to get paid. I do. They need to be able to benefit off their name, image, and likeness. But it's unfortunate just because it's like, because we're still all getting it figured out, it just becomes this unknown thing. So a lot of people were saying, I don't think the money's there to land both of these guys. But here's where I'm at with it. Do I think the AJ Dybantsa, Caleb Wilson duo could become a thing or not? 100% I do think it could become a thing. Will it? Who knows? That's the big question. But I will say this. I refuse to believe that money would be a deal breaker in landing both of these guys, 2 top 5 guys, if they want to come. If they want to be Tar Heels, you figure this out. You do what you got to do. So let's say that Caleb Wilson commits. Just let's live in dreamland for a little bit. Like I was saying earlier, what if he commits this weekend or silent commits this weekend and then announces it in December or January or whatever it is? And you've got the NIL funds or whatever you got to get together for that. And then ultimately AJ Dybantsa in February, when he plans to commit, says, hey, I'd like to be a Tar Heel too. But it looks like the money's not there. There's not enough in the coffers. Well, I tell you what, that phone call feels like it's going to happen. I'm Hubert Davis. Hey there, guy, fill in name in the blank. It's Hubert Davis, your favorite North Carolina head basketball coach. Hey, so here's the deal. We've landed Caleb Wilson. He's a top 5 player in this class. And how about this? Check this out. AJ Dybantsa, the consensus #1 player, generational talent, it seems like, in the class of 2025, wants to come. But here's the hang up. We're a little shy on the funds to make this happen. Oh, really? You want to make that happen? Oh, cool. You'd like to see the #1 player in the land come to North Carolina? Yeah, I would too. So you'll help? Neat. I feel like that's an easy phone call to make. Who's not going to want to pitch in on that? At least the big guns that have the funds for that to make that happen. I feel like Hubert Davis can achieve that. If I'm that donor, the #1 player wants to come, say less, I'm in. That's all it's got to be. So anyway, we will watch closely this Caleb Wilson unofficial visit this weekend. What's happening with that? Do we find out why he's coming back, or are we putting too much on it? And he's just like, I just want to go back because it's fun. High school kids, man, right? Like that's what it is. So we'll keep our eyes and ears on that. All right, let's switch from recruiting to something else that's going to happen in the future years. Oh man, set your alarm clock. Cook the turkey, get it in the oven, turn on the Macy's Day Parade. Let's catch the Lions game and then settle in for North Carolina and Michigan State, because that's going to be our reality on Thanksgiving Day 2025. We'll talk about that in just a second. As I said earlier, some other news that broke Wednesday, like a little earlier evening, that I thought at the time was going to wind up being the lead on our show today before Caleb Wilson drops this great bomb. I'm not going to Tuscaloosa. I'm coming to Chapel Hill. Boy, I'm just reveling in that, and I hope you are too. But Matt Norlander from CBS Sports, who does a great job covering college basketball, tweeted, news. North Carolina and Michigan State have verbally agreed to play each other next Thanksgiving in 2025 as part of the 4-team Fort Myers tip-off, sources tell CBS Sports. Mid-majors are TBD. Game will air in the late afternoon on Fox after the Lions NFL game. Big matchup. And then he goes on to say, UNC and Michigan State playing on Thanksgiving is the latest example of big-time hoops programs trying to get major holiday viewership on network TV. More games of this ilk are in the works in the years ahead, sources said. Reminder, Arkansas, Illinois play this Thanksgiving on CBS. All right, so there's a bunch to unpack from that, but I love this, man. This is great, not only for North Carolina, but I love this for college basketball. And I'm a college basketball guy. I host Locked On College Basketball in addition to this show. And so anything that's getting college basketball into good, important windows is a good thing for our sport. So if you want to go ahead and set your countdown timer, I checked it with Alexa. It's 420 days away from today, Thursday, October 4th. And part of what's interesting about this just in general, because you see this and you think, hang on here, Isaac, that's on Thanksgiving Day. Isn't North Carolina typically playing in a multi-team event in or around Thanksgiving Day? Whether it's Maui this year, that's Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday of Thanksgiving week, whether it's the, PK 80 or 85 events in recent years, like what was that, 3 years ago now? Yeah, that would have been because it was the year. Oh man, I'm not even going to bring it up. I'm just going to move on past that Sunday night 4 overtime game, or going down to Atlantis to play the Battle for Atlantis. There have been rumblings and rumors. Like I feel like I've heard Jones Angel and Adam Lucas talk about this on the Carolina Insider podcast, and obviously they're in very close proximity to Coach Davis on a regular basis, about Coach Davis not necessarily loving that 3 games in 3 days MTE format and wanting to get away from that. Well, while Carolina is still locked into a couple other of their non-conference events, right? Like we will see if Jumpman continues, because this year is the end of that 3-year cycle. They will have played all the teams. Is that event re-upped? CBS Sports Classic is still ongoing. Obviously, Carolina will be in the Big Ten SEC ACC SEC. I mixed the other 2 conferences together that we played. ACC SEC Challenge, for example. And so typically there's these other, thankfully, one-off game events that Carolina is indebted to, but there's nothing saying that Carolina has to continue to do these events. And so Carolina playing this one-off against a high major opponent on Thanksgiving Day, to me, is a telltale sign that in the 25-26 season, the Tar Heels will not play in an MTE as we typically think of it. There might be some other multi-game MTE, but it ain't going to look like what it typically looks like, which is the weekend leading into Thanksgiving or early Thanksgiving week or late Thanksgiving week, something like that. If they're playing Michigan State on Thursday, there's not going to be other stuff going on. And so, man, I look at that and it is really interesting. And so we're going to keep tabs on what that means and what it'll look like. So let's unpack this some more, because I love the idea of marquee games on big days, on holidays, and leaning into that. For example, the NBA now owns Christmas Day, right? When you think of Christmas Day and sports, it's like there are these, multi-NBA games in a row. And they've said like, hey, we're going to lean into this. Similar to what the NFL has done so long with Thanksgiving, where the Lions always play, the Cowboys always play, and now I think the third game is typically always the Packers and somebody, and you get that triple header back to back to back, like a CBS game with the Lions, the Fox game with the Cowboys, and then usually the NBC game Sunday night. And now they're wanting to align a marquee college basketball game on national TV in conjunction with these NFL games. And obviously, this is intended to not be a competitor for that network with the NFL game, because it will come right after it. It will obviously contend with one of the other Thanksgiving Day football games, but I like that the national net, like this isn't even cable. This is Fox and CBS leaning into these things. So, for example, I imagine what's going to happen is the Lions game will simply hand off the coverage of that game will simply hand off to the coverage of this game. Really smart, because as Norlander said, it's just going to follow the Lions game on Fox and then be the next thing on Fox. That makes a ton of sense to me. And think about this. Who are the Lions? Where do they play? They are from Detroit in Michigan. Who is Carolina playing in this basketball game? Michigan State. So Fox is like, man, we're going to try to line up, get all this overlap, have the Detroit Lions play. Then we're going to transition straight into a Michigan State game. Duh. Let's catch all of that overlap. That's got to be intentional. Keep as much of that fan base as possible. Like, I think this is great. Let's let the college basketball game ride the coattails of the NFL game, which is obviously getting a crud ton of eyeballs. And while some people are going to intentionally switch over to the Cowboys game or whatever's coming next, then there's a lot of people that are just going to leave it on because it's like, hey, we got the football game on and we're eating Thanksgiving dinner. And, oh, look, now it's Michigan State, North Carolina. Let's watch it, right? Well, here's the other thing that's cool. This is not the, like, Carolina and Michigan State next year isn't the first time that's happening. It's going to happen this year as well. The Bears and Lions are playing on CBS at 12:30 p.m. Eastern time. Right after that, Arkansas and Illinois are playing, and they are being tabbed as, like it literally says on the Arkansas schedule, CBS Thanksgiving Day game. Like, I love that they're like naming it, making it an event. That's great. So it's going to be on CBS at 4 p.m. Eastern, 3 p.m. local time at the T-Mobile Center in Kansas City. Actually, I wonder if I should go up to that. It's like 2 hours north of me. I'd love to go see that. But it's the same thing. Yes, it's going to go up against the Fox NFL Thanksgiving afternoon game, which is Giants and Cowboys at 4:30 Eastern. We're getting this basketball game tipping 30 minutes earlier, which is good for college basketball. But also, think about it. Who did I say it is? Bears and Lions. Bears play in Chicago, Illinois. What is this basketball game? Arkansas and Illinois. So they're banking on getting that Chicago fan base and TV watching and all the rest of Illinois. So smart on the part of TV. Anyway, Carolina, Michigan State, that's going to be a great matchup next year. It's always so good when the Tar Heels and Spartans get together, particular because we usually handle our business. What up, 09 championship game? What up, round of 32 last year? What up, game earlier in the 08-09 season? I mean, it's nice. But, man, when these two brands get together, good things happen. And almost more importantly, I'm really curious to see how this changes the dynamics of Carolina's non-conference schedule next year. I think that's the biggest takeaway out of this, is not just Michigan State, but hey, Carolina's playing this one-off on Thanksgiving Day on Fox. Oh, and it probably changes their involvement in an MTE because Carolina's not in one right now. So we'll keep our eyes on it. Does it allow for more scheduling flexibility? I ultimately think that's the benefit of this, and that's what can happen for Hubert Davis and the Tar Heels. All right, gang, thanks so much for tuning into today's show. Been great to talk as always. Denora Cersei and I will be together tomorrow to preview Carolina hosting Pittsburgh on Saturday at noon. Get off this losing schneid and start a new winning streak. All right. If you haven't subscribed to the show already on audio and video, make sure you do that. You're going to want to make sure you've hit that bell notification on YouTube so that as soon as I go live after the game with our live postcast, you can just tap right in and catch that. If you're not part of our Locked on Tar Heels Insider program, if you want to go deeper with us and chat one-on-one directly with me through text, man, Insider program is a way you can do that. You can also have access to all my stats and charts and data and have priority access for things like mailbag questions and what if Wednesdays and stuff. So we'd love to have you do that. It's a free 2-week trial, and it's just $5 a month after that. A great way to support the show. If you're not part of the Locked on Tar Heels Discord community, that's a great place to come and be, man. Hundreds of people hanging out who love the Tar Heels and have a healthy environment to talk. And man, I just absolutely love it. The link is in the show notes and it's free to join. All right, gang, it's always a great day to be a Tar Heel. We'll talk again tomorrow, but until then, peace.